Alibaba just announced a 2.4 trillion parameter model. That is, by a comfortable margin, one of the largest models any company has ever put behind an API. It's multimodal, text, images, video, documents. It has a 1 million token context window. And Alibaba's own framing is that it sits second only to Claude Fable 5 among frontier models. Now, here's the number that isn't in that announcement, and it matters more than any of the ones I just read you. How many of those 2.4 trillion parameters actually activate when you send it a request? They didn't say. And for this particular kind of model, that single missing number is the difference between this is remarkably efficient and this is remarkably expensive, with no way for anyone outside Alibaba to tell which. That's this video, 2 halves, and I'm doing both properly. First half, how to actually use Qwen 3.8 Max for free right now, the legitimate access routes, what each one gives you, and the limits. That's the practical part, and if that's all you came for, it's right at the start. Second half, everything Alibaba didn't tell you. 5 specific things absent from this launch that you'd normally expect. Why the missing active parameter count is the most important of them. What second only to Fable 5 actually means when you check who measured it. And the much bigger story underneath, which is that the company that gave the world its best open-weight models has quietly moved its flagships behind closed doors. I'll also give Alibaba genuine credit where the data supports it, because one of the most impressive numbers in AI right now belongs to them and almost nobody talks about it. Confirmed versus reported, as always. Let's go. First, what was actually announced and what's solid. The model is Qwen 3.8 Max Preview, and hold on to that word preview because it does a lot of work later. It was announced on July 19th at the World AI Conference in Shanghai. The confirmed specifications, as published, 2.4 trillion total parameters in a sparse mixture of experts architecture, multimodal. And this is a genuine first for Alibaba, the first Qwen model above the trillion parameter mark to handle multiple modalities, text, images, video, and documents. A 1 million token context window, inherited from the previous Max generation, and it's available through Alibaba's subscription plan and their agentic platforms. And one detail that's genuinely smart engineering adjacent thinking, the API is compatible with both the OpenAI and Anthropic protocols. That matters more than it sounds. It means you can point existing tooling at this model by changing a base URL and a key. No rewrite, no new SDK, no adapter layer. If you've watched our VS Code or local AI videos, you know that base URL and key field is the universal adapter of this whole ecosystem, and Alibaba deliberately made themselves compatible with both of the dominant protocols rather than picking one. That's a company that wants to be easy to switch to. Those facts are solid. Now let's get you access. How to use it free, the legitimate routes. 3 ways, and I'm only covering routes that are officially offered. Nothing here asks you to bend anyone's terms. Route 1, the official free tier. Alibaba's model platform publishes free quotas for new accounts across their model lineup. You sign up, you get an API key, you get a documented allowance of tokens. This is the cleanest path. It's offered by the vendor, it's documented, and you're not working around anything. The catch is the usual one. It's a quota, the amounts change, and you should check the current published number rather than trusting a figure from any video, including this one. Route 2, the chat interface. Qwen has a public chat interface where you can use their models directly in a browser with no key and no setup. If you just want to evaluate the model, throw hard prompts at it. Compare its answers to whatever you're currently paying for. This is the fastest possible path, and it costs nothing. For evaluation, start here. It takes 2 minutes. Route 3, aggregators and gateways. Several model aggregators carry Qwen models, some with free tiers, and the gateway approach we've covered extensively lets you access many providers through one endpoint with automatic fallback when a free pool empties. If you want Qwen alongside a dozen other models in your editor without managing a dozen keys, that's the route. And because the API is OpenAI compatible, all 3 routes work with the tools you already have. Your VS Code extension, your terminal agent, your own scripts, base URL, key, done. 2 honest cautions on the free routes. First, read the data usage terms before you send anything sensitive. That applies to every provider's free tier, not this one specifically. Free tiers are frequently free because your usage helps improve the service, and that's a legitimate trade as long as you know you're making it. Never route client code, proprietary work, or NDA material through a free tier whose terms you haven't read. Second, free quotas are a snapshot build, so nothing critical depends on one. And the practical setup, since most of you will want it in your editor, because the API speaks both the OpenAI and Anthropic protocols, the configuration is the same shape as everything else we've covered. In your coding extension, whichever you use, find the custom provider settings. There'll be a field for a base URL and a field for an API key. Paste the endpoint from Alibaba's documentation into the first, your key into the second, and pick the model name from their list. That's the entire integration. No SDK, no adapter, no plugin. 2 specific tips that save people time. First, the model name string matters and it changes. Preview models get renamed as they iterate, so if you get an error saying the model doesn't exist, that's almost always the problem, rather than your key. Copy the exact string from the current documentation, rather than from a video or a blog post. Second, because it's Anthropic compatible too, it works with tools built specifically for that ecosystem, which is a genuinely unusual amount of flexibility from a single provider, and worth knowing if you've standardized on one protocol. And here's the workflow I'd actually recommend. Rather than swapping your whole setup over, add it as a second model, not a replacement. Keep whatever you're using as your default, add this one to your model dropdown, and for a week, whenever you hit something hard, run the same prompt through both. You'll learn more about whether it's genuinely better for your work in that week than from any benchmark, and since it costs nothing, the experiment is free in both senses. That's how you should evaluate every new model. Honestly, not by reading claims, by making it compete for a job you actually have. One more thing worth knowing about the free routes. The quotas reset, which makes this excellent for exactly the occasional hard question role. It's a poor fit for high-volume automated work. A quota will empty, and your pipeline will stop. Use free tiers for the 20% that's difficult, and something you own for the 80% that's routine. That's the same split we come back to every single week on this channel applied here. Right? That's the access half. Now the part that's actually interesting, everything they didn't tell you. 5 specific absences. When a major lab announces a frontier model, there's a standard package that comes with it. Here's what was missing from this one, and I want to be precise, because missing is a factual claim, not an accusation. 1. No benchmark table. There is no published table of scores on the standard evaluations. Not weak scores, no scores. For a model being positioned as near frontier, that's the most conspicuous absence in the whole announcement. 2. No model card. The document that normally accompanies a serious release, describing intended use, limitations, evaluation methodology, known failure modes. It's the closest thing this industry has to a safety and honesty convention. It wasn't published. 3. No license. For an API-only product that matters less than for open weights, but it's still the document that tells a business what it may and may not build. Its absence makes commercial planning genuinely hard. 4. No standard per million token pricing. Access is bundled into a subscription plan rather than published as a rate, which means you cannot do the one calculation every engineering team does before adopting a model. What will this cost us at our volume? You can't compare it to anything on price because there's no price to compare. 5. No date and no license for the open weights. The framing was that open weights are coming, there is no date and no named license. And I want to be very clear about what that means, because this is where a lot of coverage gets sloppy. Open weights soon is a promise, not a download. Right now, nobody outside Alibaba can run this model. Every single performance claim about it is therefore unverifiable by anyone else on Earth. That's not a criticism of the claims, it's a description of their epistemic status. And there's a 6th thing, which isn't an absence so much as a signal. One of Alibaba's own developers described the model as continuously evolving. Read that carefully. It means what you test today is not necessarily what you tested last week, which is honest of them to say, and also means any benchmark, including one you run yourself, is a snapshot of a moving target. Combined with the word preview in the name, the message is this is early and it's changing. Why the missing active parameter count is the biggest one. Let me spend real time here, because this is the most technically important thing in the video and I haven't seen anyone else lead with it. In a sparse mixture of experts model, the total parameter count and the active parameter count are completely different numbers doing completely different jobs. Total tells you how much memory the model occupies. Active tells you how much computation each token costs, which determines speed and determines cost. Regular viewers know the examples. A model with 118 billion total parameters and only 8 billion active runs, like a small model, while holding the knowledge of a big one. Another with 284 billion total and 13 billion active does the same trick at larger scale. Qwen K3 has 16 of 896 experts active, under 2% of the model awake at any moment. The active number is where all the efficiency lives. So when you're told a model has 2.4 trillion total parameters and nothing else, you genuinely cannot say anything about it. If it activates 20 billion per token, it's a marvel of efficiency and it'll be cheap and fast. If it activates 400 billion per token, it's an enormously expensive model to serve, and the economics are completely different. Those two possibilities have wildly different implications for what you'd pay, how fast it responds, and whether anyone could ever realistically self-host it, even if the weights did arrive. 2.4 trillion on its own is not a specification, it's a headline. And here's the thing that makes the absence notable rather than merely unfortunate. For the open weight Qwen models, Alibaba publishes this number prominently. Their 36 billion open model is named for its 3 billion active parameters. It's right there in the model name. They know it matters. They put it in the name when they want you to be impressed by efficiency. Its absence here isn't an oversight. It's a choice about what to emphasize. I'm not going to speculate on why. I'm going to tell you it's the first number I'd ask for, and that until it exists, 2.4 trillion tells you about as much as a car's weight tells you about how fast it goes. Second, only to Fable 5. Who measured that? Alibaba's positioning claim is that this model sits second only to Claude Fable 5 among frontier models. Here's how to think about any claim of that shape, and it applies to every lab, not just this one. Performance claims come in two flavors. Vendor published means the company ran its own evaluations and reported its own results. Independently measured means a third party, artificial analysis, Ella Morena, an academic group, ran the tests themselves. Both have value. Vendor numbers are usually not fabricated. Labs know they'd be caught. But vendor numbers are selected. You choose which benchmarks to run, which configuration, which prompting strategy, and which results to publish. Independent numbers remove that selection. The second only to Fable 5 claim is vendor positioning. There is no independent evaluation of this model from anyone because, as we covered, nobody outside Alibaba can run it, and no benchmark table was published to even scrutinize. So the honest translation is, Alibaba believes, based on its own internal evaluation, that this model is very strong. That's a reasonable thing for them to believe and a reasonable thing to say. It is not a measured fact yet, and treating it as one is how hype cycles start. And notice the elegance of that particular claim, because it's worth admiring as craft. Naming a specific competitor as the only thing above you is far more memorable than any score. You can't fact-check a ranking that has no numbers attached. The bigger story, Alibaba's flagships went closed. This is the part I think actually matters most, and it's barely being discussed. For the last couple of years, Alibaba's Qwen line has been one of the most important things in OpenAI. Genuinely open weights, permissive licenses, competitive quality, a huge community of fine-tunes and derivatives built on top. If you've used a local model in the last year, there's a strong chance it was a Qwen, or a descendant of one. That is changing at the top of the lineup. The previous flagship Max and Plus models are API only, no open weights. This new one is API only with open weights promised at an unspecified future date. Meanwhile, the open line continues, but it continues at smaller sizes. Put plainly, Alibaba's best models are now closed, and their open models are no longer their best model. That's not a scandal, it's a strategy, and it's a legible one. It puts Alibaba in direct competition with the American labs for enterprise API contracts, which is where the revenue is. They've built a dedicated business unit around token sales. Serving a frontier model as an API is a fundamentally different business from giving weights away, and companies are allowed to change business. One more relevant fact, reported neutrally. The technical lead of the Qwen team departed in March of this year, and reporting at the time noted this alongside broader concerns about the direction of the open source effort. I'm not going to speculate about anyone's reasons. People change jobs for 100 ordinary reasons. I'm noting it because it's part of the public record of this story. And here's why any of this matters to you rather than to industry analysts. The open weight ecosystem that a lot of us depend on has been substantially subsidized by a handful of large companies choosing to give away their work. That choice is revocable. Watching one of the most important contributors move its best work behind an API is exactly the kind of signal worth noticing. And it's the strongest argument I can make for the thing this channel says constantly. Download the weights that are available to you now, because the version on your disk is the only version nobody can take back. Note the contrast in the same month. One lab gave away a 2.8 trillion parameter model's weights, permanently and irrevocably. Another announced a 2.4 trillion model behind a subscription with weights promised later. Same month, same scale, opposite directions. That's the actual story of AI in 2026 in one comparison. So what is open from Qwen? The practical answer. Let's be constructive because Alibaba's open line is still genuinely excellent, and this is the part you can actually use today. The standout is a 36 billion parameter model with only about 3 billion active parameters under Apache 2.0, and I want you to notice what just happened there. I could tell you the active parameter count because they published it. It's in the model's name. Do the arithmetic against the rules from our hardware guide. 36 billion total at 4-bit is roughly 20 gigabytes of memory. So a 24 gigabyte card or a high memory Mac handles it. But only 3 billion parameters fire per token, which means it runs at the speed of a tiny model. Big model knowledge, small model compute cost, permissive license, on hardware enthusiasts actually own. Reporting suggests it outperforms comparable models from other labs in its class. That is, in my honest opinion, a more interesting model for most people watching this than the 2.4 trillion one. Because you can download it, run it, fine-tune it, deploy it commercially, and nobody can revoke it. There's also a dedicated Qwen coding model line under a permissive license, which is what I'd actually point at from a code editor. The practical summary, use Max through the API for evaluation and for hard one-off tasks. Build on the open models, one is a service you rent, the other is a tool you own. Both are legitimate, but only one is yours. Now genuine credit where it's due, the number nobody talks about. I've spent a lot of this video on absences, so let me be fair, because Alibaba has one of the most impressive results in the industry right now, and it gets almost no attention. The previous max generation was reported to have a hallucination rate of 22.9%, the lowest among frontier models. Set that in context. Independent measurement put Qwen K3 at around 51% and its predecessor at 39%. Those are the numbers for how often a model confidently states something untrue. 22.9% against a field where the leading open model is at 51% is not a marginal win. It's a different tier of reliability. And there's a reason that deserves more attention than a benchmark score. For most real work, being wrong less often matters more than being clever more often. A model that's slightly less brilliant but substantially more trustworthy is the better tool for anything you're going to ship. If that reliability carries into the new generation, it's a genuinely strong reason to consider Alibaba's models. And it's a much better argument than 2.4 trillion parameters. The same lineup was also demonstrated running autonomous sessions of around 35 hours and over 1,000 sequential tool calls without quality degradation. Those are vendor demonstrations, so apply the usual discount, but sustained coherence over that many steps is the specific thing that makes agentic work possible, and it's an unusual thing to demo. So, the criticism in this video is about what was published, not about the quality of Alibaba's engineering. Those are different things, and conflating them would be unfair. The 5 checkables, how to judge this yourself. Here's what I'd watch for, and I'd encourage you to hold every lab to the same list. 1. A benchmark table published with the methodology stated. 2. The active parameter count, the number that makes the total meaningful. 3. A repository with an actual license, if open weights genuinely arrive. 4. Published per million token pricing, so teams can do arithmetic. 5. Independent evaluation from a third party with no stake in the outcome. When those 5 exist, this becomes a model you can properly assess. Until then, it's an interesting announcement with a very large number in it. And if you want a genuinely useful habit from this video, that list works on every launch from every company, forever. It's the difference between following AI and being marketed to by it. Should you use it? And the honest limits. If you're evaluating models, absolutely try it through the chat interface for free this week. Throw your hardest real prompts at it and compare against what you're paying for. Your own testing on your own work is worth more than every benchmark table that doesn't exist yet. If you're building something, be careful. And the reasons are practical rather than skeptical. It's a preview, described by its own team as continuously evolving. There's no published pricing, so you can't forecast cost. There's no license, so your legal team has nothing to read. Build a prototype, sure. Don't put it under a production system yet. If you're looking for something to own, the open Qwen models, today. That's the answer, and it's a good one. And the honest limits on my own analysis. Everything I've said about absences is a snapshot. A benchmark table or a model card could be published the day after this goes live. And if that happens, good, that's the system working. I'd rather ask for the numbers publicly and be corrected than repeat a headline uncritically. Check the current state before you decide anything. And note that I can't tell you this model is bad. I can only tell you nobody outside Alibaba can currently tell you it's good. Step back, because there's a pattern worth naming. Watch the 2 announcements from this month side by side. One company published 2.8 trillion parameters as files, downloadable, licensed, permanent, verifiable by anyone with the hardware. Another published 2.4 trillion as a number, behind a subscription, with the specifications that make numbers meaningful withheld and open weights promised without a date. That contrast is the whole industry right now. Not open versus closed as an ideology, as a practical difference in what you can know. When weights are public, claims get tested within a week by people with no incentive to flatter anyone. When they're not, you're left evaluating a company's confidence in itself. Both models might be excellent. Only one of them can be checked. And that's ultimately why this channel keeps returning to the same advice, which isn't ideological at all. Prefer the things you can verify and download the ones you can keep. Not because closed models are bad, some are the best in the world, but because a number you can't check isn't information, and a capability that can be withdrawn isn't yours. So here's my question, and I'll pin it below. What's the one number you'd want before you trust a model launch? Mine is the active parameter count for exactly the reasons in this video. Yours might be independent evaluation or a license or published pricing. Tell me, because if this comment section can agree on a short list, that's a standard we can hold every lab to, and honestly, a better outcome than any single video. And if you've tested Qwen 3.8 Max yourself, tell me what you found. Real hands-on results from working developers are worth more than any announcement, and right now they're the only independent data that exists. Every link, the official platform, the free tier documentation, the chat interface, the open Qwen models with their real licenses, and our breakdowns of the models I compared it to is in the description so you can verify everything I've said and test it yourself. That's the standard here. The real explanation sourced in plain English with the missing pieces named rather than glossed over. If you'd rather understand the future than be sold it, subscribe.